On today's episode, we'll talk about how to shoot better handheld, leaving a great job to follow your dreams, the importance of muscle memory, the real world, making it, and of course, Lady Camera Guy. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out The Breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, The Musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, marker. We mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Op, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. My name is Dave Comides, and I'm your host, and we are here yet again, thankfully, to Panavision Woodland Hills, who is allowing us to be in their theater because it sounds so ridiculously quiet and cool. I'm here today with a great operator, really excited to talk to her, Gretchen Warthen, who has, unlike some of the other operators I've talked to so far anyway, has done unscripted, has done, or slash reality, has done documentaries, has operated, has been a cinematographer, has done narrative, so it's like across the board. So I'm really excited to talk to her about that and hear a little bit about how that's different from what straight narrative operators do. Some of, but not all of Gretchen's credits. Narrative-wise as an operator, Welcome to Flatch, Mayans, Real Husbands of Hollywood, Call Me Kat, Mr. Mom, the TV show, Moxie, unscripted, Dave Chappelle and the Age of Spin, Making It, which I just had to pull out because I love Nick Offerman and I think he's totally cool. Road Rules, The Real World, Project Runway, Project Greenlight, The Apprentice, who had someone in it who will be interesting to hear about, I guess. And as a cinematographer on documentaries, just two right off the bat, Circus of Books and, excuse me, Breaking Their Silence. So she's kind of been all over and really excited to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. You shot also, did you shoot The Lazy Environmentalist?
I shot on the pilot.
Okay, because I was on The Lazy Environmentalist as a guest.
Really?
Yeah, I had a whole 10 years where I taught environmental education to students, and they brought me in as like an expert who sat with this family to try to go, well, you could try this, and you could try this, and you could try that. And so I was on, I don't know what episode, like episode 3 or something like that. And I saw that, and I was like, maybe I worked with her because as the person in front of the camera, I was like Mr. Deer in the headlights. So I don't remember anybody who the camera operators were or anything.
I know. Get me in front of the camera. I'm like,
Yeah, I always say there's a reason that I'm behind the camera, and it's because there's no way I can get in the front of the camera.
Exactly.
So, tell me how you got here. What's your story?
My story, I'll start with saying everybody's story is completely different.
100%.
So everybody that asks me, how do I get to where you are? It's like, I cannot tell you how to get to where I am because it is a crazy cross-country adventure where you stop in strange towns and you break down in weird roadsides and you get on a dirt road that's less traveled and then it's a dead end and you go back. And there is just there's no roadmap. So anybody who's just starting, keep an open mind, try everything, work in different departments. It doesn't need to be camera. A lot of people will not work outside of camera, but camera is very important, especially in narrative. It's important as an operator that I worked in wardrobe, I worked in set design, I worked in props, I worked in a lot of different departments because at the end of the day, thousands of hours and millions of dollars have gone into planning and execution of what is now in front of my camera at this moment. And it is my responsibility to make sure that all those thousands of hours that people have put in and toiled over are represented correctly. Yes, the director's vision, and this is all in support of the director's vision or in service to the director, but I'm the last stop before it gets recorded.
Yeah. So the gatekeeper.
I'm the gatekeeper.
Yep.
So I will often talk to the on-set dresser, or if perchance the set designer's there, are there certain elements in this scene that mean something to you that you think move the story forward, that if this is our fourth wall, we're never going to see? And quite often they'll be like, well, yeah, is this not going to get seen? I'll be like, no, and the blocking that we now have will never be seen. And they're like, great, and they'll work it in somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's just, we pay homage to those who came before us, and those who came before us are the people that created the set that we're now about to shoot.
Yeah, they build up this world that then we have to represent.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think I have to respect everybody that's on set and know that I get the glory because I'm the camera operator capturing it. But if they had not all been present, it would be a black box.
Yeah, that's
It'd be
exactly right.
nothing.
You'd be looking at open space, which nobody would want.
Yeah.
No question.
And
No question.
sometimes I lose sight of that when, you're an operator, you're tunnel vision, you have something you need to execute, and I lose sight of that. But I try to always kind of take a breath. What am I not seeing? What should I be seeing? And is there somebody here on set that was somehow connected, usually the on-set dresser, to what I'm seeing? And
Sure.
so I work heavily with the on-set dresser. They're all my
It's
best
funny.
friend.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that's okay because this is interesting. I work hand in hand with the onset dresser, and I mean, it's a complete team. But we haven't talked about that a lot. Tell me about that relationship and how you approach that, because there's a weird thing that I've found with working with the onset dresser where you have something that you think works, but you don't want to step on people's toes either, and there's a back and forth there, right?
There is a back and forth, and quite often, once I get my frame in, and it's like, I know these are where the actors are going to be, and this is what I'm going to see, I'll often go to the onset dresser and invite him to my monitor. So I'll invite him to look through my camera lens with me, and I'll talk to him about, like, what are you seeing? Do you like what you're seeing, or there's something that you would like to change? And we'll kind of talk through what they think. Some on-set dressers are like, I don't know, I'm just going to place things where they were supposed to be.
Yep.
And continuity-wise, they're just not that concerned. But some of them are like very artistic.
Oh, yeah.
And they understand kind of why everything's there, and they're very on it, and they love that collaborative process because usually they're not invited.
Yeah.
But their work is what we're saying. And not only that, they're having to move everything around for us and turn the room. And something that was pointed out to me early on from the onset dresser, and I see operators do this all the time, and I was doing it when I first started, but then I realized quickly that it's disrespectful, but I didn't see it as being disrespectful.
Okay.
If I need to move something for my frame or my camera and the onset dresser's busy, I'll move it. But at the end of the day, if there are any continuity issues, it falls to the onset dresser.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can get fired for moving that object and not putting it back where it was supposed to be, not me.
Yeah.
So I go to them and I explain, I want to move this, that, or the other. Would you like to move it, or can I move it?
Yeah.
And quite often they'll move it or they'll ask me to. It just depends on the onset dresser. But I just want to make sure they are aware something has been shifted off its mark.
No, it's a really good point. And one, by the way, that I think every operator early on has to learn,
Oh, yeah.
because you're so excited about, oh, well, this has to be that way and this, but you don't realize it's not even, and I wouldn't even take it to the level of getting fired. It's just that they're suddenly doing 12 things over here and they come back and something's different. And then it's overwhelming because it's like, wait, what's changed if you don't share with them? And usually early on, I don't know if you'll do this, but early on, I'll, the first day I'll usually say to them, hey, I'll always ask for you, but if you're doing something else, are you cool if I adjust something and let you know? I'll always let you know, just to give them the heads up, because I think they're realistic, unfortunately, about the fact that we never have enough time, and there's only one of them, which there should be 3 of them.
I know.
I mean, it's ridiculous that there's one of them.
Yeah.
But I like what you said about inviting them to look at the monitor, because really what you're talking about is you're including them in the process.
Yeah.
I think a lot of onset dressers don't get it. People just look at them and like, oh, you're the person who moves the couch. Like,
exactly. And they don't know their name.
The person who dresses the entire set. Like, it's much more important than that, and knowing their name, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's another thing. But no, it's a really good note, which Yeah, I don't know that we talked about a lot on here, so I'm glad you hit that. But backing up, how did you get into
How I got started. Okay. So, I started working really young.
Okay.
Like I was 12 and I wanted some designer jeans and my dad was like, "If you want designer jeans, go get a job and buy them yourself."
That's great.
And I'm like,
Where did you grow up?
"Oh, Southern Idaho." It was a little town of 200. There
Okay.
was like
200.
yeah, so small.
That's a really little town.
It was so small and very Mormon. And my family, they were like hippies from San Francisco and
Wow.
thought it would be nice to move to the mountains of Idaho when it was time for me to go to school.
Okay.
So we move. My dad was like, beautiful long hair. Like, if you were going to dress up somebody to be like the hippie that's going to be in a magazine and be beautiful, the beautiful hippie, that would be my dad. Like,
Okay.
everybody worshiped my dad. He was always like the cutting edge of everything.
Uh-huh.
And so we moved to Idaho, to this tiny town of 200, and we're Episcopalian hippies from San Francisco, and they're all like old school Mormons that like their relatives came over on the covered wagons and all
So
that
you
stuff.
fit in very nicely.
Oh, it was really bumpy, but it
And
was
how old were you when you moved there?
it was kindergarten.
Okay, so
'Cause we lived in the Mission District in San Francisco, and they were worried about it being a little dangerous for me to go to
the
school.
Mission District in San Francisco to
the
Idaho.
mountains of Idaho.
Wow. Well, but you were probably young enough that at that age you just go, okay, this is
Yeah, it's like,
what
oh,
it is
different
now. Yeah.
friends, no
Yep.
big deal.
Yeah.
But it was bumpy, and I won't get into the bumpiness of it. But so I grew up in this small town and got a job early. And it's interesting what financial freedom can do for somebody. And I'm always telling, nieces and nephews, get a job.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was a senior in high school, I had a full-on resume. So my senior year in high school, I worked for a law firm, and one of the lead attorneys in it was the attorney general for the state, and really high-profile law firm. And I was a legal clerk. Like I did kept track of all the files, updated the law library,
Wow.
took documents to court to file
The
them.
attorney general for the state lived in a town of 200?
No.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I guess I did leave out a
No,
huge,
okay.
huge thing.
Just
So I started, so that job, and then I got a job in a nursery with plants. It was
Yeah.
just like whoever was hiring, and I thought it would be interesting. And then my parents divorced, and my mom moved to Boise,
Okay,
Idaho,
Gotcha. So you're in a bigger
to go
city.
back to college and get a degree.
Okay.
And so I moved to Boise with
Gotcha.
her.
Okay.
So now I'm in Boise, Idaho, senior year in high school,
Working at this massive law firm and
get a job at this
people.
law firm.
That's
So it's really great.
Yeah.
Like I've got paid holiday, vacation, 401k.
Oh
Yeah, I'm
my
a senior in high school and I have like a retirement plan happening.
It's amazing.
And I'm not really even thinking much of it because it's just where life takes you.
Yeah.
And so I have this really great job, and then that takes me into college, and they, love that I'm in college. They work around my schedule, and there are computers there, so I don't have to hang out at the computer lab. This is dating myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do my papers there, and I end up working for that law firm for about 7 years, and I decide paralegal's where I want to be because I don't have to pay for law school, but it is a job still in law,
Yeah.
and they make good money, and it's fascinating. It's interesting. So I'm basically an attorney's assistant. So that's what I was going to do. Totally made sense. It was a good life.
Mm-hmm.
I drove a BMW. I mean, it's just like, it was so great. And then, but a big Madonna fan. So Madonna had a Make My Vogue video contest, and some political science department friends and I were like, oh, let's make a video. So we go to Sears and we buy.
Like 1980 something or other.
Is this in the 80s? Yeah, 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
1980s.
And what you're in your 20s basically.
I'm in my 20s.
Okay.
We're young, we're
Yep.
running around,
Yeah.
whatever. And so we get a camcorder at Sears
Uh-huh.
because they have a great return policy.
Yeah. By the way, at a certain point early in my career, my camcorder came from Circuit City because they had a great return policy. Because I couldn't afford a camcorder.
You're young, you're broke, you
I
want to
love
do a
it. That's so
project.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get this camcorder, and we wrote what I now know is like a treatment and shot list and all this stuff, but
But
we
you
didn't
had
know.
no idea. And this is pre-internet, so it's not like you can look up.
Yeah, we
can't
can't
put in
look at
ChatGPT.
Exactly. How do I?
Yeah.
No, this is still when you go and you have the card system at
Oh
the
yeah.
library.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, there's the library.
Yeah.
There's no internet.
We'll explain after the show what a library is for the
Yeah,
people.
I miss the library. So we shoot this video.
Yeah.
And I should also mention that we did not know what voguing was.
Because the video wasn't out yet.
The video wasn't out yet.
Okay.
We didn't know what voguing was.
Oh, interesting.
So we're doing like drill team moves and whatever. I don't know. But we had a great time. It was awesome. And there was this really strange thing that happened to me when I put that eyepiece to my eye and started taking the vision in my head and putting it on a digital format.
Yep.
And I loved it. It kind of changed. It was a big like shift in me. And so that fall, one of the people that did the video with me, it's like, hey, let's take intro to video and we'll just make projects. It'll be great. We did it for audit, no credit. So we didn't
Like
have
at
to
the
do.
local community college?
No,
or
it was
something?
at our university.
Oh, okay.
We
All
went to the comm department and signed up, and no papers, no tests, no reading. We just would only do what we wanted to
Yeah.
do.
That's
We had a great time.
That's
And I ended up in there making an autobiographical documentary towards the end. And that was my final project. And the teacher was like, he came to me and he said, this project is really great. I want to talk to you about the next class you take and maybe future projects. And I looked at him and I said, this was just for fun. I didn't take this class
Yeah.
to be.
It wasn't a career.
This isn't a career. I have a great career. I know where I'm going in life, and
Yeah.
it's great. And he convinced me by telling me, make whatever you want. Never come do another class. I don't care. We'll do an independent study. I'll give you 6 credits. Make whatever you want.
That's great.
And I'm like, make whatever I want. He's like, yeah, I'll give you a set of keys to the gear room. Check out whatever you want. If you are inspired in the middle of the night, just come down, unlock it, take a camera, shoot something,
That's amazing.
put it back, as long as you're
Yeah.
not interfering with students in class.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay. Not realizing what a gift this is. It's just somebody like
It's incredible.
saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
Sure.
So my next project was a documentary feature because I didn't know any better. That's a huge thing to take on. And I'm like, hey, everybody. So I'm like getting all my friends to shoot this project with me.
But that's actually the benefit of stupidity sometimes, is you
know,
don't know how
right?
big of a road you're going down.
Yeah,
That's great.
it was great. And the feature won awards and made it
What
into
was it on?
festivals. It was about, there was like a drag queen court in Boise, Idaho, which at the time was the largest in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay.
And some people thought possibly the largest west of the Mississippi.
And this was at a time when that was not a thing that was
Oh
around.
yeah,
It wasn't
we
like
knew there
that.
were drag shows at the local Boise gay bar, but
Yeah.
I didn't know what this court was. I didn't
Yeah.
know what they did. And so it was just kind of about them and what they do. And like they did Meals on Wheels and all this stuff as the drag of straight people.
Yeah.
Like people didn't know that they were necessarily gay. And if they
Mhm.
did, they didn't. It was like they were just regular members of society out doing Meals on Wheels and all these like really important community services that could have failed without them.
Yeah.
But nobody really knew.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. And then the different people that were involved. And I'd always known about drag queens, but I'd never known about drag kings
Okay.
or trans people. One of
You
the
just
people,
walked into this world you didn't really know and said,
yeah, like we'd go to the gay bar and dance and hang out and maybe some drag shows, but I had no idea.
And because it sounds like you're essentially self-taught, did you just go in with the camera and just start?
I just went where I was interested.
Yeah, just that's what I was wondering. You just
it was like-
this seems interesting, so I'll go talk to these people. Or
Yeah. And I would go to events and like film different things and like, hey, what do you, and then I would ask people what they were doing like off camera. And then certain people became very interesting to me. And then I would sit them down for interview.
So you just followed your instincts. You didn't
That's
have
it.
any
Just
playbook.
instinct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Which I think is why I still love unscripted so much.
Yeah.
So at the end of that year, I realized that I really loved camera. And even though, and I'm young, I don't have debt, I don't have family, I don't have a house, I don't have a car, I don't have anything. It is easy for me to give up
You have freedom.
this
Yeah.
this career I've created in the legal field and walk away from 401k, paid vacation, bonuses when we settle a case, walk away from all of that and get a job at the local news station as a pedcam operator.
Wow.
And I don't even think they have pedcam ops in news anymore. So I did that, and I worked for the college, like doing sports or if there's a speaker, whatever, and then continued to do side projects
Okay.
on my own. And so, yeah, so that's how I got into camera.
That's amazing. Do you remember what it was? You said something when you picked up the camera and put it to your eye. There was something. Do you remember what it was?
It's interesting. I feel like and I'll do this, like if I'm having stress at home, if I can get to work and get my eye in an eyepiece, I go into some magical,
So this is something that connects with you.
It's interesting. It's like I go into another world and I can disconnect from myself and live somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And I've been in some pretty scary situations, but once I put that camera to my eye, all my fear goes away.
That's interesting. I haven't done a lot of documentary. I actually would love to do more because I find it fascinating. But I was on a documentary in Haiti right after the earthquake. That was a documentary that was ongoing about Partners in Health, but they felt like they had to tell that part of the story because Partners in Health is in Haiti and all these things. And we were down there and we were filming in operating rooms. I mean, they weren't even operating rooms. To call them that wasn't quite the thing, but there were people operating, doctors operating. And I remember going in thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this because I get kind of queasy when I see, and some of this stuff was gnarly. But the second that I got the camera up to my eye, it was sort of just, oh, I'm in here and I'm looking at this stuff, but I don't know whether it was I'm doing a job or whatever, but it just sort of that part turned off. And it's somewhat similar where I just went, oh, okay. So I want to make sure I get that, and I want to make sure I frame this, and I'll connect these two things. And it just sort of went into autopilot in a weird way. So I wonder if that's similar on some level.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Even in narratives, when I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I get in there and it's like, oh, what if I do this or I do that? Like I'm interacting with the story as an operator all the time.
Absolutely.
And in documentary, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's constant.
Sure.
You know.
So you started out in documentary, it sounds like, clearly.
Started in documentary, moved to Seattle after that to work in whatever, because at the time there was Twin Peaks, there was Northern Exposure, Medicine Ball, Sly Stallone, just had a big movie up there. All up there. It was like really happening. And so I move up to Seattle right about the time everything goes to Canada.
Jeez.
So I'm there, like the strike right now, everybody's unemployed.
Yep.
So it was kind of like a similar thing where there are all these really highly qualified people that now have no work.
Yeah.
So are you going to hire me or somebody from Twin Peaks or Northern Exposure or?
Yeah.
And so there was just no way.
Yeah.
So working at the law firm, I made a lot of photocopies. So I was able to get a job at Kinko's.
I love that. That's great.
So I worked at Kinko's for a couple of years, but it was at Capitol Hill, and it was when grunge was big, and all these like people who did comics came through, musical artists, vampires that could only pick up their copy orders at dark.
Wow.
And it was just this really interesting collective of people that came through that were very creative. Yeah. So I was still surrounded by a creative vibe. And then there was a local access station there that did a lot of community documentary stuff.
Okay.
And I got hooked up with them through a referral. So it wasn't a lot of work, but I was able to continue to do that sort of thing. But I was seconding and firsting on independent narratives, basically for free. In Seattle, in the winter, it rains. The days are really short. The nights are long. It's cold. Nobody shoots there. Like you can rent all sorts of crazy gear for nothing.
Yeah.
So the winter time is when local directors, DPs, or hopefuls would do their own projects. So I worked on lots of those.
That's great.
To make connections. And then my loader on one of them called me and said, Real World's coming to town. Let's get jobs.
So the MTV Real World,
once again, MTV appears.
So MTV, take me back, because MTV Real World, was that like the beginning of that whole genre, sort of?
It was.
Of like,
Real World New York.
Picking people together and seeing what happens, kind of?
Yeah. Real World New York was the first one. Okay. A lot of people say it was Cops. But what I'll say is the difference between documentary and reality is documentary, they're there whether the camera's there or not. Cops is a docu-follow.
Interesting.
Those cops are going after those criminals, whether the camera is there or not.
That's very interesting.
So Real World, in my opinion, was the first series. There is American Life, which is a documentary, but that family would have been there, whether
True.
the cameras were there or not.
That's true.
So to me, that is still documentary.
Yeah.
So Real World kind of evolved, and I had the conversation with one of the creators in a very long car ride once on Road Rules, going from point A to point B.
Okay.
And her name is Mary Ellis Bunham, and her and John Murray.
Oh, she's a big name in that whole world.
Huge name. She comes from soaps. John comes from docs.
Okay.
They had partnered and created a small production company they were just kind of starting out. MTV came to her and said, we want to do a soap opera for like college kids and like the MTV crowd.
Uh-huh.
And so they did all the budgets, they did all the numbers, they did everything.
Meaning a scripted soap opera?
Scripted soap opera.
Okay, yeah.
For kids,
Well,
basically.
sounds like a bad idea.
And, but it'd be like living the rock and roll lifestyle. And I mean, we see a lot of television shows like this now.
Well, I was going to say, it almost sounds like My So-Called Life, which actually is a great show.
Yeah. So something like that, but they couldn't afford it. So John and Mary Ellis came up with this idea. They're like, okay, what if we take like 6 really interesting people that could be characters, in a narrative, but they're not. They're actually real people. And they're roommates. And it's the real world. It's the first time they're away from their parents. So now they get to find out who they really are.
Well,
So we want people who are very self-assured and willing to like kind of stand up for what they believe.
yeah.
But hopefully will be open to other people.
And I'm assuming that they designed this to put people who are going to be in conflict together on some level, or have differing views. Because
Have differing views that they can, through the season, talk through their differing views and come to a higher sense of self.
Oh, so that
To
was
get away from what their parents feel, which is what they all think that, oh, parents, da-da-da, but the parents have a lot of
instilled their values.
Instilled values. So it's basically questioning the values that you have as 18 to 22.
Yeah.
And then what are your real values? So people come to a higher sense of self, and hopefully these conflicts are resolved.
Interesting.
They were huge on conflict resolution.
Really? I have to say, I know the show and I'd seen pieces of it. I never watched the show fully through, so I don't really know too much about it, but conceptually I understand it.
Yeah.
But so is there a tremendous amount of manipulation in those shows?
Well, what I'll tell you on Real World, when I was doing it back then, I was not even allowed to talk on my walkie in front of the cast.
Just there's no polluting of the situation.
Yeah. It's like flies on the wall. We don't want them. We don't want to call attention.
Wow.
So only operators and the audio mixer in with them. There were these things called stash boxes where they would put batteries and tapes. And as an operator, I would go and I would change my own battery and my own tape and then come back. And then the director would let the ACs know when they could go refresh the stash box when the cast was in a different part of the house.
Wow. I'm amazed. So let me ask you a question. So you're focusing yourself and you're doing everything.
Oh yeah, everything.
The ACs are basically just dealing with tapes and
they're logging the tapes. They're prepping.
But you're doing everything. And,
I'm doing everything.
In the house, how many camera operators are there at any given time, or is there such?
Well, in those early days, it was all very much single camera.
Oh, really?
Now we have this luxury of there's usually 2 cameras, 1 audio, but then it was all single camera. At the time, it was as much 24/7 coverage as could possibly happen over the course of 5 months. And it was 6-day weeks, 6-day weeks, 10-hour days for 5 months. So it was very intense, very physically demanding, all handheld. And there were only 4 camera teams. And they would bring in 1 team as a day play if needed, if there's a lot of stuff.
So a 10-hour day, first of all, this is a full-size camera?
It was a beta cam, so they're around 35 pounds.
Yeah, but this isn't a little handy cam.
This is not a handy
This
cam.
is a camera on your shoulder. And it's on your shoulder. You said a 10-hour day. 10-hour day, are you doing like 45 minutes between do you change out? Or
We don't. I mean, we might change out if there's another operator there, but quite often the cast would split into 2.
So one person would have to go one way and the other person would have to go the other way.
Yeah. Or there would be one operator and the cast would split into two and the director would choose who we were going to follow.
So you're saying that in a 10-hour day, you might have the camera on your shoulder for 10 hours?
Yeah. Usually, what was really nice about directors back then, and they were documentary directors, is they could shoot and do audio.
Okay.
So the 3 years that I was directing, I would spell my operator and or my audio mixer and the camera assistant.
But I'm sorry, you would what, your operator?
Give them a break.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, like if my operator had been shooting for quite a while, I'd be like, hey, take a break. I'll shoot for you.
I'll jump in there. Yeah.
So I would shoot for them for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
And then, or I would mix audio or whatever. So it was a way but we'd also choose stand down for however long, but we'd stay with the cast and listen and watch. We wouldn't just
because
leave them alone.
sometimes nothing's going on. They're eating a sandwich or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
put down the camera, but you had to be ready to pick it up and go.
Yeah. And there was this kind of balance that we also needed to do where they didn't feel like, oh, now I'm doing something interesting if the cameras are up.
Yeah.
So it's this balance of like when to put the camera down and when to pick it back up again, but like to break ourselves and to not shoot nonstop. And that's kind of gone away because
Is it more, meaning it's more manufactured now? Is it?
it's not more manufactured now. It's just it's nonstop shooting now
It's nonstop shooting.
because we might miss something.
I see.
But for me, some of the greatest stories ever told on Real World were missed. They were told through interviews. They were told through scene work of people talking about it.
Yeah.
And it was fine because
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens in documentary.
Sure.
Although this is reality because those 6 kids would not be there if the
Exactly.
cameras weren't
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So
Oh.
that was what makes that weird.
So you're in the kitchen, you have the camera on your shoulder, and there's something going down. 2 people are having an argument, whatever. Nobody is in your ear. You're making your own decisions on how to frame what to.
For the most part, because it is a dialogue-driven medium.
Yeah.
And if the director's in my ear, I can't hear the dialogue.
Yeah.
And if I can't hear the dialogue, I can't follow it.
That's what I'm
properly.
saying. But so as the camera operator, you're in there making your own decisions in the moment of how to frame it and how to tell that story visually.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the director will be kind of the eyes in the back of my head. And people, when they have a conversation, tend to say what they have to say 3 times.
Oh, really?
Yes. So you know you're probably going to have another go at it if you miss him
That's
saying
what
it the
I'm saying.
first time. And it's also, it's dialogue driven. You've got this beautiful, clean audio.
Sure. 'Cause
And
everybody's mic'd and all that
Everybody's
stuff,
mic there. There was no multi-tracking at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
The camera was the record deck.
Wow.
The audio mixer would send to me. And they were so good at finessing because it was a 5-channel. So if you had 6 people, 4 were on wire and 2 were boomed.
Okay.
So there was all this constant strategizing, and they were mixing down
That's incredible.
the boom and the wired mic
Yeah.
into one feed to my camera. And if there was a glitch in there, and I always had to be listening, it was on me to know if there were hits or we lost audio or whatever.
Wow.
So it was very intense.
I mean, it just sounds like your mind has to be going constant. I mean,
It does.
I think about working a 12-hour day, but when I'm on narrative, as you know, it's like, I'm working, and then I'm sitting on the dolly and just waiting for something to happen, keeping an eye, but
Yeah.
not, you can pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
But that, it just seems like even when someone's eating a sandwich and the camera's down next to you, you have to basically be making sure that if something happens, you're ready to go.
I'm ready. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that much handheld? I mean, just physically.
I feel like I talk a lot about like women are made to be camera operators because it's in our DNA to carry babies.
Sure, but
And-
not to carry babies on one shoulder.
Well, we carry them on the
Yeah.
right side on our hip or
Yeah,
whatever.
okay.
And there's a lot of hip shooting. When people are sitting, I always shoot from my hip
Okay.
because how else am I going to get that low? I don't like
Yeah.
to shoot down on people, so I shoot from my hip a lot. Sometimes people now it's acceptable to like bring in an apple box. The rules when I started were much stricter.
Well, it sounds like from what you're telling me, and again, I don't watch a lot of reality TV, so I'm making some of this
I
up.
don't watch a lot of it either.
It seems like it was a little bit pure back then in the sense that, as you said, those were reality shows, not documentaries, but they were really trying to form them like documentaries.
Yeah.
And now, and I keep using this word because it's just where my head goes, it seems like they're sort of going, let's get everything so that in editing we can make the stories be what they are, as
Yeah.
opposed to these are the stories and we're going to what you were doing. These are the stories and we're going to show what they
Yeah.
are.
Back when I started, even mundane things you would shoot because maybe a month later there's a huge fight and it's like something happened in the kitchen when they were making the sandwich and they made somebody else mad, but they kept it inside and then they explode a month later.
Okay.
So you don't really know what the story's going to be
Yeah.
sometimes until maybe 2 or 3 months down the road.
Interesting.
So everything has potential to be story, even
Wow.
if it's not. You just never know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that in life also.
Yeah.
I might offend somebody accidentally, not realizing it, and then I hear about it later from somebody else, or they confront me
Uh-huh.
sometimes years later. And it's like, what? So it was just this kind of, and there were no OTFs, like on the fly interviews. There were no in the moment interviews. There were formal interviews once a week. And those were done by the lead directors.
You're saying 10 hours a day, everything was real. except
Everything
for
was
when you
real.
Had that one day or one half a day when you did interviews or whatever.
Yeah, and it was always the DP that did interviews. So
Okay.
I was always shooting. So we just follow them doing whatever it was. And they would call this thing called the bat phone and be like, hey, we're going to leave. Great. And so the AC run bag, and I started as an AC, but was operating by the end, is by the front door. And we just pick it up. And then if they walk, we walk. If they get in a cab, we get in a cab. If they get on a bus, we get on a bus.
I can't even imagine this.
It was so physically
It's got to be.
out of control that I had a roommate at the time and I lived in Queen Anne and there were stairs and I would piggyback her up and down stairs every day. And I was like mad to work out because you're walking backwards with the camera with them everywhere. And they didn't have a car that season. So they walked everywhere.
They walked everywhere and you walked with them.
And we walked with them.
Wow.
I mean, the fitness level. And you can't just walk with them. You got to run ahead and get the long shots and then walking by and then from behind. And then you got to run and get in front of them again.
I mean, just thinking about it, it's kind of overwhelming. That's
it is overwhelming. And you have to be listening to what they're talking about. And have your shot list. I need, reaction shots. I need coverage shots. I need wide shots. So
but are you making that shot list up on the fly?
On the fly, yeah.
And you're just mentally keeping it in your head.
Mentally keeping it in my head. But the nice thing was because I had done a few years, assisting in narrative, I was able to watch narrative operators I was able to watch narrative DPs make choices. As far as what lens to use, what focal length to use, what that does, what are the angles of coverage, what the line is. And so I was able to bring that knowledge and start testing it out and playing with it. And, the shooting ratio is insane because each week
it has to be.
Of basically 24/7 coverage is distilled down to one 22-minute episode.
Oh my gosh.
So if I make a mistake, it's not that big of a deal. And it's dialogue driven. So it's all about the audio. So if my camera shot is awful, they can choose something else.
Well, and the reality is, based on what you just said, the chances of it actually needing to be in the show are slim anyway. Because, I mean, what is that? I don't even know what that ratio is, but it's insane.
And every time, like if you think of the course of your day, all the scene setups in one day of your life. It's hundreds.
Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just like this,
and that's just one person. So you've got multiple people.
Yeah.
So you, how many years did you operate on the show?
I operated basically a season and a half on that show, operated the first 3 challenges. But then I directed on Real World and Road Rules for 3 years and other reality shows that were kind of starting.
And so as an operator, you literally never knew any of these people because you didn't interact with them in any way, shape, or form.
All observational.
Amazing.
And there was a really nice thing, though. When I started, there was this whole thing about no judgment. If you ever spoke a word of judgment about the cast, like, I can't believe they're doing that.
You mean off, like outside of when you're not filming?
When I'm not filming, I'm in the control room. And I'm watching the other operators shoot, which is a great way to learn tricks. New eyes on the same room. Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And but anytime you would say anything judgy, dollar in the judgment shot. And so it kind of taught me this piece of advice that applies to real life, but whenever I'm shooting somebody doing something I can't believe they're doing in front of my camera, I don't know the 20, 30, 40, 50 years of their life that brought them to this moment in time
Yeah.
to react the way they're reacting. How can
Yes.
I judge that?
You know Tommy Shalami, who created The West Wing and
Not
whatever.
personally.
He's a amazing.
West Wing was great, though. Loved it.
Yeah, that's I met him just before that, but I was interviewing him and he said something really interesting, which is, you've got an actor on set and they just can't get there, or they're exploding because they're upset about something or whatever. And he said your initial instinct is to sort of, go, oh, it's an actor and this and that and the other. He goes, but you have no idea what's going on with them. You have no idea what trigger this is, because they're doing something emotional, right? So you have no idea like what they're pulling from that may be so damaging in their life to get there or whatever. So you really can't judge them for these things. I mean, it can be frustrating. You can be frustrated by it or whatever, but
Yeah.
but you just don't know what someone has led up to that, which is exactly what you're saying.
Mhm.
But he was talking about actors, but it is true. It's all that stuff. And we used to joke that in narrative, the worst thing the worst thing in narrative TV was when you had a director who was going through a bad divorce because they never wanted to go home. But it is the thing of like, you don't know what people are going through offset. So
You don't.
that's
And even if their
part of
life
it.
is pretty good right now, you don't know
Yeah,
what has happened in their life to lead them to process the way they
that's
process.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah. So it comes down to cutting people slack, I think. And we work in a high pressure industry, so there's that also. But what about just since I mean, you've clearly done more handheld than most people.
Yeah.
Seems like.
It was been a while. I think it was about 7 years ago. Somebody asked me to sit down and calculate how many handheld hours I had done. And at that point in my career, it was over 10,000.
Oh my God. That's incredible. Now how do you physically deal with that? What do you do?
This is an interesting question because when I was nothing but reality for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And it is such a physically demanding job.
Oh, I
You're
can't.
shooting, you're holding the camera
I
over
don't
your
think I can do
head,
it. I'm
you're
just
holding it
saying.
under, you're backpedaling, you're
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. It's this constant lifting of the camera. I was in the best physical shape of my life. I never worked out.
Uh,
And the doctor would be like, you really need to be going to the gym. A job isn't a workout. But nobody understands what a
Sure.
reality
But what about
operator
just,
does.
I mean, do you stretch every day or I mean those kind of things or just or
I
just
didn't do
yeah,
any of that
yeah,
stuff.
I know. Yeah.
But what I did do, and this was taught to me very early on in that first real world, is shooting from the hip. Don't always shoot from your shoulder.
Yeah.
Don't take a knee. And your belly button is where your one point is, which is your center of balance.
Yeah.
And so much of camera operating is physics. So much of it is
Yeah.
physics. And you just need to think of the physics of the situation, and that will help you create a more stable handheld shot.
Okay.
So if my one point is my belly button, the halfway between my top and bottom, and I take a knee, now that one point, 2/3 of me versus 1/3. So it's no longer in half. So that increases my
You're swaying
my
and
sway,
movement and whatever.
which increases my movement.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can shoot from the hip, which is in line with the one point,
Yeah.
it's like riding on an airplane over the wing. If they're going to be turbulence, that's the most stable
That's the most
place.
stable place because
And
it's the center.
It's the
of gravity.
center.
Yeah.
So if I shoot from my hip
Yeah.
and people are sitting at a table, that's hip level, my shots are going to be super solid. I'm not going to have weight on my neck or my shoulder
Yeah.
or my back. It's somewhat in my lower back, but and then just standing with my feet, stable, spread a little bit, bent at the knees,
Yep.
which also strengthens your legs.
Uh-huh.
And then I can also reach my hand under the camera to cradle it and pick it up a little bit, and then I can move around at that same level and hold the shot
Without
and
having
then
your hip
resettle.
jostle it as you walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once I get kind of tired there, maybe I'll go back to my shoulder. And the nice thing is, the further you back up, the less you notice the height that the
Right.
camera's actually
Sure.
at.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of like physics things and lens things you
Yeah.
can do to but like these I do this thing where I put my thumb in the middle of the camera underneath and I lift it up over my head
Uh-huh.
and I can shoot that way, but it stretches out my trapezia.
Uh.
It stretches out my shoulder. It stretches out everything.
Yeah.
and then I can go back into shooting. It's great. And then there are these low angle wides that I do where I'm stretching down to the floor with the camera, and I'll do like a 180 around a scene.
Basically, you're working in stretching, keeping your muscles stretched
Yeah.
while you're shooting.
These are crowd pleasing shots. People
Yeah.
are always like, oh my God, that looks so great. That looks so
Exactly.
awesome. And like when I did Project Runway, they're on these tables so often cutting patterns and whatnot, and you can't really see it unless you're straight overhead.
Oh, you got to get. Oh, that's right.
So I'll put the camera over my head looking down.
Wow.
To see what they're doing. But it stretches me out. It's a great angle.
Yeah.
People love it. And so it's a way for me to like stay physical and
Sure.
and not let the you know, I feel like I'm pretty lucky that I still have a handheld career. I haven't suffered any
That's what I
serious
was gonna say. It's
injuries.
amazing. You haven't had any injuries, yeah?
No, I had a torn bicep narrative. Very heavy camera. We didn't have dolly grips to help us. And we only had 1 second. And my first just didn't want to help me.
Oh, jeez.
And it was early in my career, and I wanted to be strong as a woman and not be and it was
Interesting.
45-pound,
Yeah.
you know, Alexa Classic with big glass. And,
Yeah.
and over time, yeah. But yeah.
Were you one of the first female camera operators were there female camera operators that you ran into and looked up to for guidance, or were you at the beginning of that pack?
It's interesting. I think the first woman operator may have come in full-time in Boston, which was season 6.
In the real world, or
In the real world.
Okay, yeah.
And
Sorry, the first woman camera operator after you had gotten there.
no,
Oh,
before me.
Before you, okay.
The
gotcha.
first period
Oh, okay.
was this woman named Lila Fiume. She was Italian.
Great name.
And when Real World and Road Rules started, or Real World, I guess Road Rules travel show, it's kind of taken for granted, but nobody was from Los Angeles. The crew was from all the locations where it had shot
Yeah,
before.
they pulled local people, right? Yeah.
Everybody worked as a local.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody flew them. If you weren't a local there, people flew themselves out, put themselves up,
Oh my
worked
gosh.
as a local.
Yeah.
So they would like pick up people, and that's how I got onto it. Like after Seattle, it was Hawaii. So a bunch of us flew ourselves to Hawaii, stayed in the cast house while they were painting it, helped them paint, looked for places to live, found apartments to rent,
That's
sometimes together, sometimes apart.
Yeah.
And then by the first day of shooting, hopefully we weren't on the couch in the tech room
Oh
anymore.
my gosh.
It's like
Wow.
totally like college all
Yeah,
over again.
But there's something great about that in a weird way. I'm sure
Oh,
it
the
was a lot of fun.
bonding
Yeah.
from those days
Yeah, you
was
must have
like
great stories.
incredible. Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What was the question?
About women operators.
Oh yeah, so Lila Fiume, she was the first. And that season of Real World when I came on, I thought I was the second, but I think I was actually the fourth because I think there were some other
But did you overlap with them, or you knew them, or you just heard?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So Lila I met there, and Lila was great. She was the one that taught me, because I started as an AC, but they'd be like, oh, you want to shoot? Go in and break your operator.
That's great.
Oh, nothing's going on. Want to go shoot something.
Yeah.
And then the director would watch me and like guide me through things.
Oh wow.
And my operator would watch also and
that's
guide
great.
me as I was shooting.
That's so
And
great.
then when I came off the floor, we'd put my tape in.
This is
'Cause I'm
good,
no
this is
longer-
bad. This is whatever.
I'm no longer on the spot of like
Sure.
actually rolling.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
those nerves are gone. And then I can look at what I've
What a
shot.
great way to learn.
Why did I shoot
God,
that?
I wish narrative could be that way.
I know. And reality's still like that.
Yeah.
If people make it that way. And I tell a lot of even narrative operators, get on a reality show, especially non-union where you can shoot
Uh-huh.
and nobody's calling in a grievance, and get in there and shoot, because now there are robotic Pelco cameras that see the room, and you're seeing the image from your AC that's
Oh,
in
so
there.
you can really
to
critique
shoot.
everything you're
So
doing.
you can
Yeah.
see their posture in the room, where they're at,
Oh wow.
furniture obstacles,
Yeah.
where the line is,
Yeah.
and without actually being in the room. And then you can take snapshots of that if you want to. And then when they come off the floor and you review the
Sure.
footage, you can show them, so this is where you drew the line. It may have been easier for you if you had been here instead.
Huh.
Or this was your posture, and so it's a way to help people
Yeah.
learn how to operate
That's
and
great.
get handheld skills, because it's not like narrative. Every take is potentially going to make the edit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it will make the edit. You just don't know which exact take or which part of what take,
Yeah.
but it will. So pressure's on, nobody's practicing. But in reality, you have the freedom to practice, especially if nothing's happening and you can just go in and shoot
Sure.
and practice.
Yep. Yep.
And all the things that go on. And, you know, something that makes my life a lot easier, and it's kind of this goal and it took me probably 7 years to get there, is muscle memory.
So huge.
The focus, the zoom, because we don't shoot on primes. The show I'm on now, almost everything's primes,
Yeah.
but real world zooms, a lot of shows zooms, like the speed of the zoom, how to get there, whip pans from one person to another, especially if you need to change your zoom size
Yeah.
to keep the framing matching.
I can't even comprehend knowing how to do all this stuff.
So you're whipping
It's
back
incredible.
and forth, and your zoom and your focus are changing, but you want to nail it when
Yeah.
you get there.
Yeah.
And that's all muscle memory. It's just practice, practice, practice.
And
practice.
and instinct, right? Like you've done
Yeah.
it so many times, you just know. Yeah, that's incredible.
So my goal, because it's dialogue driven, was to get enough muscle memory that I could forget that I had the camera on my shoulder and just. And I tell people, this is, if you're starting out and you want to know how to cover a scene, this is how to practice all day, every day. Let's say you're going to a friend's house and they're having a party.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in, you're walking up and you're like, oh, this house is really great. There's your exterior establishing. Like, oh, this is where they live. This is great. This is a cute neighborhood. Those are all your exterior establishing shots.
Yeah.
You knock on the door, they open the door. Hey, how you doing? And then you walk in and they show you around. Maybe this is your B-roll or whatever, your geographic establishings. And then you go wander to see where you're going to end up at the party, who you're going to talk to. That's your wide shot. You're looking all over, you're trying to see where you're going, and then you notice something, and it's like, oh, those people look interesting. There's your medium, because you're walking into them, but you're still looking at all of them. And then you come in and somebody's talking, and then you go to them. It's like, oh, so there's your single of the talker.
Yeah.
And then they say something, and you're like, oh, I wonder what so-and-so thinks about it. And then you look for the reaction. There's your reaction shot.
Uh-huh.
And then you're back to who's talking. Then maybe two people start talking, so you're looking at both of them. There's your two shot. And then you get bored. You start looking around. That's picking up all your reaction shots. And then maybe you go back to a wide. People change where they are. People come in and out. And then you have to remember to get back to do a new geographical establishing wide, because the geography's changed for the edit. Somebody's gone now. Somebody's new is there.
Yep.
And then, but you get kind of bored with it. And then you kind of start looking around and it's like, oh, I wonder what's going on over there. And then it's another scene. It's another bunch of setups. It's more coverage.
But at the end of the day, narrative, non-narrative, whatever, it's still all storytelling. Right?
It's all
You're just
storytelling.
breaking down storytelling, and it's the same way in narrative. We all do it too. It's just it's more designed and controlled and contrived, for lack of a better word.
And the first feature I DP'd, the director didn't want anything preconceived with
Narrative
the actors.
feature.
Narrative
Narrative
feature.
feature, yeah.
She wanted the actors to come in the room and just do their thing. She wanted a closed set, just her, me, the actors, nobody else. I don't even know if the AD was in the room. And so they would work it all out, hash out whatever they were going to do. But I would have marks all over my pants. Like from, my AC days, I would put the marks all over me, so they just came off easily.
Ready to put them down or whatever.
And once they had it all worked out, and then they ran the scene with only the director, I would lay all the marks where my camera was going to be.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't mark them.
Yeah,
I would mark myself.
Yep.
And then we would come in, we'd show it to everybody. The AC would put down proper marks.
Yep.
And I would look at the AD and I would say, every mark on the floor is where the camera's going to be. So for hair, makeup, and wardrobe, as far as who we face first, or actor performance with the director, who we face first, what order do you want me to go in? But I knew every shot that I was going to get after that rehearsal.
Yeah.
There was no talking about, well, what if we did this or what if we did that? It was like, to me, I just knew everything that we needed.
But that's got to be because you had such a shorthand that just, I mean, you have the shorthand that most people will never have, just because it was drilled into you, right?
Yeah.
Because you had to be making those choices on the fly as something was happening.
And the nice thing about it was we made our day every day.
Oh, bet.
We could add shots if we wanted to.
What movie was that?
It was called Hannah Free. It was with Sharon Gless.
Oh, okay. Was it a good movie?
It was interesting. It was I mean, I really liked it. I thought it was really interesting, but a lot of us, it was our first movie that we had ever done. And I look back on it and I'm like, ooh,
Oh, of
ooh.
course. Yeah.
But I think overall it was pretty cool.
That's great.
Working with Sharon Glass, I mean, was really awesome. I liked her a lot. And she was very, I feel like, patient with everybody, kind of it being their first time.
Their first time, yeah.
Yeah, because it had been a stage play and the person that
Okay.
wrote it wanted to create a movie
Yeah.
out of it. So it was a lot of theater people.
Sure.
And yeah,
That's great.
It was great.
So when did you, so was that when you got into narrative? Was that your first time into narrative or?
That was my first time into narrative as an operator.
Uh-huh.
And because it was the operator DP position combined, because there wasn't money in the budget for both. I mean, everybody was just making $100 a day, one of those. But yeah, and I really liked it a lot. It was very stressful, and it was the first time I had to manage multiple departments.
Okay.
Manage the grip, manage the lighting, and everybody's kind of new, and so am I.
Yeah.
And I had come from a reality world where there's a lighting designer, like anything that's at a location or a house, like real world, there was a lighting designer that came in that designed everything, and a gaffer installed it. Then the DP shows up, and they're basically just running the cameras and doing a little bit with lighting, but not a lot. Maybe they're doing interviews or this, that, and the other, but
the world is the world, and you're looking at it.
Yeah, and so narrative, now it's all on me.
So how did you know how to run the crews, and talk to? I mean, that's a very different.
It was bumpy. It was really bumpy. But what I did know, I had quizzed a bunch of DPs that had also done narrative ahead of time, and I'm like, how do I do this? It's super low budget. Da 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 da. And they're like, light through the windows. Just make it, just light through your windows with big HMIs, and then, do some fill in the room. Keep it simple. And then you have consistency and whatnot. And, you need to know script-wise time of day, so you know how high or low the sun is going to be and what color gels to put on.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I could never get those answers, so I kind of made them up myself. But but it was a really good lesson for me in lighting through windows. And there's a reality doc follow. We're following entrepreneurs developing products, but they're all still home-based because they're small. So we're actually in their homes, and they would be there whether we were there or not.
Yeah.
But we are there following them. So it's kind of this...
It's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid of the both. And there are 4 units, each lead camera of the unit light stuff. And it's funny, I worked with one of the other units the other day, and their lighting aesthetic was so different from mine. All the fixtures we used, I'd never pulled off our truck.
Oh, wow.
For me, I just want a couple hard sources through lights or through windows to light up the environment. And then the people will move in and out of this light. They won't be lit themselves. The environment's lit
lighting the environment
in a way that... So that lesson that I implemented 15 years ago on a feature is something that I was like, oh, okay, great. And it serves me well in documentary also. I used to do the home follows for Project Runway. At the end of Project Runway, there are, I think, 4 finalists that go away to do full-on collections. And this awesome guy named Tim Gunn goes to their house or their studio or wherever and looks at their collection and critiques it so that they can make changes for Fashion Week. So we're traveling all over the country to, I don't know what house that we're going to come into.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's your lighting package? And I'm like, I want 2 jokers to push through windows.
Big lights. Yeah.
And then a couple light panels.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else because I can bounce a light panel into some board and it's a nice soft fill on an interview, punch some HMIs through some windows in the background. And now we have, all these LEDs. So there's not even
totally
heat anymore.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I can plug them in.
The back of a trunk of a car now. It's incredible.
I never have to roll in and say, where's your fuse box?
Yeah.
That's not even a question anymore.
Yeah. No, it's everything has changed so much. It's incredible. So you work now sometimes. It sounds like you still work on basically documentaries and narrative at this point, or do you still do reality and unscripted?
I do competition reality.
So
because
like Amazing Race, or no, I mean,
no. There's a show Making the Cut, which is like Project Runway.
Okay.
Only it was
so
international.
competition, not necessarily sports, but yeah,
Not
people,
sports, sorry.
whatever. Yeah.
You have I like you mentioned Making It earlier.
Yeah.
These are craft people making crafty projects.
I actually kind of liked that show. I don't think it did very well, but I thought it was sort of
I mean,
funny.
we did 3 seasons.
Oh, is that right? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Just well, let me do. Is Nick Offerman just fantastic to work
It's
with?
the best.
He just seems like I've read most of his books, and his books are sort of like, I wish I knew this person. It's just like he's such a fascinating individual.
He's hilarious.
He
He's
is.
kind. He knew everybody's name.
It doesn't surprise me at all. The thing that amazes me about him is he seems like this type of person who's still sort of shocked that he's like a well-known actor and that he's making a living at this. And he's just a really interesting guy. Have you ever read any of his books?
I have not.
He has a book called Build Your Own Canoe, which is sort of his biography,
Uh-huh.
and it's riddled with sort of his views on life, really, and it's just a fascinating read. Anybody who wants to, who's interested should read it. But anyway, that
maybe
show. So yeah, it was like,
So I watch their process, and there's usually only 1 or 2 of us in the workroom at a time, and that's a huge multi-camera show. So we do rotate in and
yeah.
out.
And the show, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is basically like it's going to be a competition to build like a birdhouse that looks like this or whatever, some sort of crafty whatever, and then they get these people and they all sort of
Yeah,
compete against each
they're
other. Right?
crafters.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, what? That's a job?
I know,
Wow.
right?
I want to be a crafter.
Yeah.
So I love shows like that and like Project Runway where they're designing clothes or anything where they are creative experts.
Okay.
And because I can't talk to them, all I do is wander around and look at what they're doing.
Well, you get to learn a
How
lot
are they
too,
doing
right?
that?
Yeah, it's
And
fascinating.
it's my job. Like
That's quite
any
cool.
question I have, I just point a lens at it to answer my question.
Yeah. Okay.
So the days they fly by because I'm just watching these people with real skill and I can watch like all the little details of
Do
how
they get to the point where they're completely unaware of you? I mean, not unaware. They know physically you're there, but they just ignore
they
you.
kind of lose sight of us.
So they do at a certain point stop, quote unquote, performing for the camera. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not as self-conscious around us.
And I guess that's probably part of your job too, is to not be, but to be obtrusive,
Exactly.
but not be obtrusive at the same time.
Yeah, that beginning Real World, my operator at the time, his name was George Alves Jr., and he was the master of holding his energy tight to his body.
What do you mean?
Like he could almost disappear.
Really?
Yeah. Like you come in, we come in as operators. You can't shut us up. We don't stop talking.
Yep.
We love what we do. We talk about ourselves
Here we go,
endlessly.
right here.
We have all this energy that we're just like spilling out into the room all the time.
Yep.
But people pick up on energy. And like if we're having a bad day, it's just like, oh, and people feel that. But when you're in a reality environment and you're with people that are living their own lives and you're there to document it, you need to keep your energy tight.
Yes.
You need to keep your anger, your frustration, your judgment, everything off, out of the room. Leave it in the tech room, leave it at home. And he had this ability, like, if they felt like Cast was dancing around wanting to say something, but they felt too subconscious about it, they'd send George in. And within 5 minutes, they'd start talking.
Oh, interesting.
Because he had this way to just kind of disappear from them.
And they were just 2 people in a house or whatever at that point. Oh, that's
and
fascinating.
his camera work was.
Okay.
Let me take a moment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Something you don't want to talk about?
No, I can totally talk about it. Yeah.
So I actually paused there for a minute because as Gretchen was talking about this operating, she actually got a little misty, and I thought something had happened, but you were just saying
No.
it was such beautiful operating that it actually affected you. I mean, which is look, here's what I'll say. Number one, I hope someone some point in my life thinks something I do is that
You're
good.
operating.
And secondly, that it's
Yeah.
unscripted. It's not what you would think.
Well, it's interesting because like his ability to just be invisible and people to be vulnerable in front of
Yeah.
him and him to be, to have no judgment and no energy there and to allow them a safe space to just continue to be themselves.
Incredible.
But the way he would cover it, like you have to move, you have to still cover.
Yeah.
and they will see you in the periphery. There's no way that you don't change the energy of a scene by walking up to it. But he was so good about they would recognize he was there, and then he would just kind of fade away.
That's amazing.
And he could shoot live, which is like you just see it play out in this single camera oneer, this whole scene, where you don't have to edit to cover up anything. There are no repositions to cover up. But to know where to go, when to get the reaction, somebody fidgeting. I don't like to go to hands just as a bailout cutaway. But he would know when to go to the hands, to the this, to the that, to suddenly back up into a wide shot.
And it made sense.
To slowly move in.
Yeah.
It was just...
It's ballet, right?
Yeah, something like that. It was just absolutely amazing.
And the fact that, I look, as a Steadicam operator, I can understand what you're talking about, but I also get to go, I've looked at the rehearsal and I've looked at the thing and I know what's going to happen. And when he does this, but he's doing it live. And
for him to quiet his internal dialogue, which is something luckily he was my operator when I was ACing.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And when we were in the field, there were no microwave transmissions. So the directors didn't see what we were shooting, but it's audio driven. So they just want to make sure the audio was there, and I could visually look at him and know by the tilt of his lens if it was a wide or a tight.
Gotcha.
Tilts down, it's probably a wide. Tilts up, it's a tight.
Mm-hmm.
And because the audio mixers were always booming, they also knew the tilt of a lens where they could put their boom, which is kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
Especially with multi-tracking. But his ability, and I could watch him, and then we would go back to the real world house, and I'd be in the tech room logging his footage, and then I could see what he had done.
Yeah.
And the choices that he made.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I would go on the floor and I would be shooting a scene, practicing, I could implement all those choices and what he did.
So great.
So my aesthetic comes from being invisible. Like I'll never wear anything bright. Number one, you'll see it in reflection, practicality there. But number two, I don't want to call attention to myself. And then the shooting live so that they can place the edits where they need to be for emotion or to convey a story. But yeah, anybody who can really cover a scene live and listen, like I will get emotional, like watching their footage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because in the early days, there weren't a lot of us in reality, like maybe 100, including all the producers, but maybe a couple dozen operators, maybe. I don't even know if it was that many when I started.
Well, because there was only like 3 shows out
It was
there
Real World
right?
Road Rules,
Yeah,
and then Disney did this thing called Bug Juice, which I also worked on.
Mm.
But you could watch the way somebody was shooting and knew who they came up under.
Really?
Knew who the directors probably were and what production company they were with.
That's because I would have no idea, but that's incredible.
And it was interesting. And I had somebody call me once and say about this operator that they were working with, and they were like, "So she came up under you, right?" And I'm like, "Well, she did AC for me for a little while." She was like, "I knew it. I knew it. I knew it." So it's like,
cool.
All our tricks.
You have your style.
And style. Yeah. And I always tell people, don't, in the reality genre specifically, if you want to be an operator, don't AC for the same operator all the time. Because you need to, everybody has different eyes. Yeah. And you need to learn what you do and don't like, and then that creates your style.
Well, and the other part of it, I think, is you can have 4 great operators, but that doesn't mean that what each of them does is what's going to work for you. You have to go, I want to see what you all do, and then I'll take and modify whatever works for myself. And I think that's everything we do, right? I mean, I did
a doc series around the world, 12 years ago now? And I think there were just like 4 or 5 of us, and we had a 3 sets of AD teams by the end of it. It was a monster show where we're traveling the world. We're in Haiti. We're here. We're there.
What was it?
It was called Operation Change, and it ended up airing on OWN.
Oh, wow.
OWN didn't create it, but that's where it ended up at. And it was a real monster, and I knew, and I inherited the crew. So I knew the strengths and weaknesses of all the operators and the scenes that we were going to shoot and the intention of the scenes. This one's going to be emotional. I need this operator. He has an aesthetic
Gotcha.
very similar to George Alves Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be beautiful for this. This scene is that. She's great at this. She's so physically fit. She can backpedal 10 miles. I'm going to put her there. And the AD team, without telling me, switched everything around.
Oh, jeez.
And we also had different pieces of camera.
I'm assuming you were directing this.
No, I was the DP.
You were the DP. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And we had different cameras. We were using a full frame camera. It was the FX3. It was the first one that came out. We're the first people to use it.
Okay.
So we had two of those. I went F800s, which are like beta cams, which are like, you know, the run and gun choice of everybody.
Yep.
And then we had a red and some other stuff, but they had intention. And so the camera crews went out that morning with all the gear that was intended to go with them, and then got assigned to different scenes and they were supposed to shoot, or different destinations. And I was so upset, and I talked to the AD team and they're like, hey, this is plug and play. We send operators wherever they need to go. And I'm like, but we went over all this last night, and I'm the DP.
What's the point of that?
And the director, and I sat with you and made all these choices.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't see, everybody should be able to operate. And it's like, but you don't understand that we operate differently.
Yeah.
We all have strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. And I want the perfect person with a perfect scene. I don't want anybody, struggling or bringing back maybe work that they're not going to be proud of. So like, I put a lot of thought into who I have shoot what, and everybody is strong on this team, but some listen and some don't. And if it's a scene where I need somebody to listen, this is who I'm sending. Yeah. But like, I really struggled with this AD team for a long time, and they ended up leaving. And then the next AD team that came in, it was amazing. They were,
that's great.
Everybody was happy. The footage was exactly what it needed to be. And it was like.
So when you go to narrative, now as a narrative, you told me you work mostly as a B camera operator, right?
Yeah, I did A camera once, and it was like, I was like, wow.
And digging it, or?
I mean, at that time, I still hadn't worked with a proper A camera operator.
Okay, all right.
Somebody that runs the set.
Yeah.
And when the DP steps away, it doesn't matter because the A cam, somebody that I need to run everything through. Up to that point, it was kind of like multi-cammy sorts of things.
Yep.
Where the A cam was usually just facing who our number one was, and then I was facing the opposite direction, and then we had a wide bailout.
Okay, gotcha.
And so the first time I was an A camera and actually leading it and choosing who's going to do what shots, and it was all strength and weakness sort of thing.
Yeah,
like,
same. Yeah.
And they had 3 cameras on every scene. It was shot kind of like a sitcom, kind of like a multicam. So we were cross shooting. It was not directional at all.
Okay.
So we had our steady was always our wide, and then we were cross shooting. But just to figure all that out, and then to guide people, and when somebody was struggling with coverage, that it's now on me to help them get better.
Yeah.
And it's all handheld, and it's like, I can balance your camera for you. That's what you're struggling with. And they're like, but I don't want it balanced. I want the handles on the front. I want it front heavy. I want a big monitor in front of my face so it blocks me from seeing the set.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, but if you just listen to me.
Trust me, I know what I'm
just trust me. And they were just so resistant. And that's one of my weaknesses, people who are resistant.
Okay.
Having sit-down conversations with people. This is what I need from you.
Yep.
I know this is what you want to do, but I want you to do this instead.
Well, and also, by the way, in that situation, it's look, you can do this any way you want, but the way that you're doing is not working, and we need it to work, so you've got to try different.
Yeah.
But it's not easy.
Before then, it's like, oh, the DP takes care of all that stuff. Not necessarily.
No, it depends on the show. I mean, it depends on the show. But when you're, question that I was wondering was when you're, and the reason I was asking it this way was when you are a B camera, which I think you told me you've done more B camera than A camera.
I love B camera.
Yeah.
I love it.
Is it weird? Is it weird? Because when you're doing, road rules and the real world and all these things, it sounds like
everybody's A camera.
Well, yeah, and you're constantly making decisions, and you're thinking about the cut, and you're doing this and you're doing that. And it seems like when you're B camera, it's a little bit more like the slice of the pie that you're controlling has come down much smaller, and it's very like you have to work within the A camera parameter, and it is narrative, so it's rehearsed. Is that It's the wrong word, but is that boring? Just because there's so much less that you have to, or is that refreshing because it's just like, oh, I can just finesse this little piece of it?
I like it because I just finesse my thing.
Okay.
And I as a B camera operator working on Mayans, I would be B, sometimes C, and the A camera operator, amazing.
Who's the A camera operator?
The A camera operator is Michael Pierce. Everybody
Okay.
calls him Pierce.
Okay.
I think he's from Australia.
All right.
He's got the easy rig, he's got the ZG, he's got the hand, he's got all the things,
Uh-huh.
but he's super physically fit. So he can wield that Venice with a Cook Anamorphics
Yeah.
like it's an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so I love watching him, and he does his process out loud on comms. He always has his comm,
Oh, I see.
and I love it to
What-
hear the A camera process. Like,
Tell me what you mean when he does his process on. You mean
Well-
during rehearsals? You're saying, or during?
yeah, like when he's setting up, he'll be like, "Okay, so I'll be here, and I'll be going there, and then I'll
I
do
see.
this," and then he'll go talk to the actor, and he'll be like, "So we're going to do this, that, and the other." And they're very particular about marks on Mayans.
Oh, okay.
Very particular about how things are going to look, and the actors are all on board with it.
Oh.
It's really beautiful.
That's kind of nice. that
Sometimes
someone
there'll
does
be
it still.
this really violent, awful scene, and then they'll call cut, and the actors will look down. "Oh my God, I wasn't on my mark. I'm so sorry. Did I ruin the shot?" And it's just like,
Yeah.
I mean, for as dark as that show is, it was one of the more loving, friendly,
Oh, wow.
happy sets I've ever been on
That's great.
in my career. I loved it. I love going to work every day. But as B-Cam, so Pierce, a lot of times, because of the way they shoot that show, there is no room for B-Cam. So I would, still be present, never sitting on the truck waiting, and think, if I did offer a shot, would this work? And then even if I never offered it, just always keeping my mind going.
You're playing the game, right?
I'm playing
Yeah,
the game,
yeah.
and I'm also looking at what he's doing, and I'm in Village,
Mhm.
quietly in the back, looking at how he operates everything,
Yeah.
because I've seen the process of how he built the shot.
And now, how does it change, or
How his
what's-
execution, how his execution
That's-
changes until he's happy with
That's
it.
cool right there. That's fantastic. It's I when I am on set and where I've said this before on the podcast, but I find that after a while I just repeat stuff over and over. Is when we're setting up a crane shot. If we have like camera PAs or something like that, I usually tell them, like, if you're not doing anything right now, go grab headsets and listen to this, because that's one of those things that most people don't get to see, and it's not something you learn inherently. You have to sort of watch people do it and listen to people do it, like you were talking about. It so it sounds like you're getting that all the time on there,
It's
which
amazing.
is fantastic.
I love it because Pierce is a very good operator.
Yeah.
He's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Every lens change is like, what is the story we're telling with
That's
this
great.
lens change?
That's-
And the DP is Vanessa Joy Smith, and she's right along with it.
wow, that's fantastic.
And
Yeah,
and the respect on that set, and just the approach
that's great.
and everything I learned, and that's the first thing I've done where I didn't shoot a lot as B camera.
Where you mean where you're not used on every
Every shot, usually I'm the tide of something, or if there are child actors, just shoot only them because they don't do things twice.
No, absolutely.
Things like that. So I tell people, if you come in as a B cam, don't be upset because you're not shooting. This is the best education that you're getting paid for. You're not paying for it. Somebody's
Yep.
paying you to be there. And if you're quiet, you can stand in the back of any video village. Nobody's going to care.
Yep.
And then you can think of questions to ask the ACAM, because operators love to talk about themselves, and watch the process and talk to the ACs, the focus puller, when he did that, he's doing these movements. How do you communicate with each other to make sure that you can get the focus?
Yep.
And so understanding my focus puller process by watching other focus pullers.
And you
answer the
said
questions.
you're thinking of what could I offer up and what do I offer up? How do you make the decision of whether you should pitch this idea or not? What's your
Well, if I think it's absolutely positively a shot that they could use or might need to get to,
Yeah.
and we're kind of low on time, and I know that it will not interfere with the A camera shot at all, I'll go to the A cam and I'll say, what would you think of
so you run it through them
us
first?
coming in to
Yeah.
do this?
Yeah.
But first I'll go to my team, my AC team, and say, hey, I'm thinking about offering up a shot. You guys all cool with that?
Yeah.
And usually they are.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk to the A camera, and then Pierce is always like, oh, talk to Vanessa, the DP, about it.
So you run it up the chain,
I,
basically. Yeah.
respectfully run it up the
But
chain.
I think a lot of people, it takes, there are people I know who don't do that. And then sometimes what can happen, I mean, it depends on, there's so many camera operators who are like, I don't care, do it, go talk to someone, like they don't want to be bothered with it. But I think it's important to do that, because then what happens is you end up, if you jump something, you end up someone going, well, that's totally going to mess with my shot. Why didn't you come and talk to me? So it's, even if it's, that they're going to go, it's totally fine. I think you're right. You have to sort of go through those steps so they have a heads up of what's going on also. And I know it depends on who I'm working with. If I trust them, I don't really care if I'm the A camera operator or the B camera operator, but especially if they're newer or whatever, sometimes if I look over and go, wait, why is track coming in? And it's not necessarily that I have a problem with it or whatever. It's more just like, I don't know what's going on, and someone may ask me, I wish I knew what was going on,
Yeah.
So it's,
and sometimes the DP will throw me on a shot and I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I'll get the AC team aware, but I'll go to the A cam and be like, just so we're communicating properly, I've been asked to do this. Where am I out of your shot? Where am I not going to ruin your movie?
Yeah.
And then there's also the thing, I don't like offering a shot without checking to make sure. Like I do it very quietly, because sometimes if the director hears, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's amazing. But the DP's like, I'm not lit for that.
The cat's out of the bag.
I'm not lit for that.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like, I have to be very careful. But there was a show I did once where the A cam was like, whatever you want, just run it through.
There's some people like that. Yeah.
The DP was like, just ask the director if they want it. And I'm like, but I should ask you first. If you think you should ask me first, fine. Otherwise, just ask the
director. The thing is, I think the key is you go in assuming that you should run it through the channels. And if they go, look, you don't ever have to bother asking me, just go to so-and-so, then I guess that's what you do. It's every show is different, right?
It is. And that same DP may be different on another show.
Yeah.
So it's like you always have to read the room again and again and again, even if it's the same room.
But it sounds like, an answer to my original question, it sounds like it's not boring for you to be on narrative, just because there's so much new to learn of how it's just a different style and different everything. So there's
absolutely.
And to me, that's the best part about this industry is like, you're constantly learning something, even if it's on a total, even on the shows, we were talking about playing the game of what would I shoot? It's like, you get on some shows and they're not challenging. And what I'll usually do is go, okay, well, if I could do anything I wanted to do, what would I do here? And so that's sort of how I keep my head in the game there. But I think we all have these games that we play, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
For me, it's always learning.
Yeah, because that's what keeps it interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What totally not doing with operating, but I have to ask you about this. You have an Instagram account.
Oh yeah, Lady Camera Guy.
First of all, where does the name come from?
Well, it's funny. Erica Geishan used to be an audio mixer in reality, and she was early days back on Road Rural. She could, like, her ability to MacGyver audio situations and get audio and get mics on people or mics hidden places.
It's great.
There was no problem she could not solve. Absolutely amazing.
Great.
Lovely traveling companion. I loved working on Road Rules with her. She was great. So we stayed friends, and kind of went on as reality got bigger and bigger and bigger. We all just, that tight group of 100 and fewer people that did everything together, like we all kind of lost track of each other work-wise. But I would still hang out with her, and I was hanging out with her once. She said the funniest thing happened to me. She was on some cooking competition show, and there were these two Italian brothers that came in, and she said their shirts were like starched, noisy, they had hair on their chest, they had chains, and she was A2ing on this one. And
what's A2ing?
A2 is the audio person that puts mics on people.
I see. So this is like her nightmare.
I mean, she's just like, there is not a thing about this that's going to be easy.
That's great.
And so she's like, hey, I'm here to put a mic on you. And he's like, what do you mean put a mic on me? And she said, they have these total thick Italian accents. And she's like, well, I'm with the audio department. I'm going to mic you up because you're going to go in this cooking segment. And he's like, hey, Vito, come over here. And he's like, what is it? He's like, look, it's a lady audio guy. And they were both just stunned and amazed that
Oh, that's great.
they had never worked with a woman in the audio
Yeah.
department before. Their minds were blown, and all day it was like, "Hey, lady audio guy!" And I just thought it was so hilarious.
It's fantastic. It's even better. I mean, I always thought it was funny, but it's even better now that that story is behind
I
it.
know.
So you
And I'm
became
like,
the lady
dude, I
camera
need to be
guy.
lady camera
Yeah.
guy. And this was, I don't know, 15 years ago or so.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I just started signing emails and whatever, lady camera guy.
Okay.
Gretchen Warthen, lady camera guy.
Yeah.
And so it was just this funny thing. And then 6 years ago, I was on a show with this Steadicam operator, Jessica Lopez, who is very into social media presence.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's like, "You don't have an Instagram?" And I'm like, "No, why would I want I mean, I have a personal Instagram." She's like, "No, a professional Instagram that just shows you operating. It's public.
Yeah.
It's where you promote and brand yourself so that people can see you." And I'm like, I don't know. I felt really awkward about it. And she's like, "No, no, no, you need to do it. You need to do it." And so she encouraged me, and we set up lady, and she's like, "What are you going to call it?" And I'm like, "I got to call it Lady Camera Guy." Because that's how I sign everything.
Yeah.
So Lady Camera Guy was born, and I started putting up some pictures of myself, but pictures of other people that were friends of mine. And then shortly after that, I was on a documentary in South Africa, and we were on this, it was about women in the poaching war and how the way women look at problem solving is different than men.
Yeah.
And it's been a situation that men have been trying to solve, but now that women are involved, and it was this area in South Africa specifically, it's changing the way poaching's being handled, and they're having some pretty good progress with it.
Yeah. It's funny, when I was looking up what you've done, I came across that and I thought, oh, I got to watch this. This looks fascinating.
It was amazing. Like, one of the simple things that people don't understand is a lot of these preserves were created and the tribes that live there were pushed off of them.
Yeah.
And when your ancestors have been in the same crook of the river for centuries, and then you're pushed off, you can't just go live somewhere else because that's somebody else's tribal land.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then these people end up in cities and they have no skills. A lot of them are illiterate, and they struggle, and it's just bad. And so you've got that. And then you've got the fact that a lot of local people are so poor, they cannot afford to take a safari.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can do your own safari, but you have to have a car. And a lot of these people can't afford a car. So all of a sudden you have, or not all of a sudden, over time, you have big game animals that are being protected, that these parks are making a ton of money off of.
Yeah.
And they're white people. And you have the local people that have been displaced that can't even go see those animals anymore.
Sure.
And resentment builds, and then there's the lure of the poacher of going in and getting back what is rightfully
Wow.
the people's.
Wow.
So this one woman's idea was, in this grade school, every quarter they do a project. It's an art project. They draw their favorite animals, they read about them, they learn about them. And a lot of these kids have never seen a cheetah, never seen a lion, because they don't run wild. They're
Sure.
on the reserves.
Yeah.
And they can't get on the reserves because they don't have the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
No money, no access.
Yeah.
So they don't care. They don't resonate with these animals. It has nothing to do with them. They're just pictures of
Oh,
books.
interesting. Yeah.
So they do these art projects, they learn about them, and then they get them on a bus and they take them on safari.
Yeah.
So these kids are going on safari 2 or 3 times a year. They're seeing the animals, they're becoming connected, they're understanding why conservation is important. And then when they get old enough, this woman is working with them, then getting paying jobs working.
In the refuge. Wow. That's
So
amazing.
now they have
Yeah.
the connection.
Well, so it becomes something, it's a connection, and it gives back to the community as opposed to just taking from the community.
Yes.
That's
So
incredible.
it's like the women's perspective. And so it was a very fascinating doc.
Yeah.
And we were at this rhino, this hidden, we had to have our phones off, tracking everything, at this preserve, and I broke my ankle.
Oh, geez. In the
Luckily,
middle of nowhere. it sounds like.
kind of in the middle of nowhere, but luckily it was at the end of the day. And so I had to come home, and there's this kind of thing in production. If you're injured, then you're all of a sudden a liability. And a lot of times people that are injured, it's like, well, should we hire them? Did they recover from their injury? Especially in reality, where it's so handheld and so
yeah.
physical.
Yeah.
So I just went off
Should
the
we
radar.
try it? Yeah.
I went off the radar. I was at home. I had back when Movie Pass was around, I was doing a movie every day at the movie theater with my broken ankle up.
Yeah.
And but I was just out of I was just, not working, not doing anything. And so I spent a lot of time on Instagram and a lot of time on Google. And I started finding other women operators and that were doing interesting things or that I felt were inspiring. And I'm like, oh, she's cool.
Yeah.
So then I started posting women I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And, at first it was just a post a day. And then after a while, as I followed more women and more women started getting on Instagram, and everything I follow is a public account so that I can repost it.
Yeah.
I don't like to use the word hate. I don't like it when I follow somebody with a private account and they have such great content,
Because you can't.
but they won't make it public, even though it's only work related.
Yep.
And it's something that's kind of unique to women. I've never met a guy operator that has an Instagram account that's private.
Oh,
They're all
wow.
public.
I didn't even know there was a private or public.
Yeah.
That's what I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just, continue to post and about at the SOC Awards this last year, I was talking to Rocker Meadows and he was telling me about all these different organizations that do stuff for women, minorities, people who don't have the financial ability to like go to film school or people who are struggling to get on sets, all these different organizations that he's working with to help people get educated and mentored and on set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now in my link tree, there's links to all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I follow them and now I repost events and things that they do.
Great. And at this point, what is it? You have like 100,000 followers? Or
No,
something?
no. I have
No?
61,000
Oh,
followers.
excuse me, only 61,000 followers.
Every so often it starts to explode, but with the explosion comes, I mean, right now it takes me an hour or two every day just to keep up with
Oh my
it.
gosh. So does it was what I was going to ask you. Does it become almost a burden? Not in a bad way, but it's this thing that you feel like you have to keep feeding almost?
Well, the thing is, I absolutely love it until I post something that goes viral. Then it becomes hard because then I get a lot of people commenting and sometimes it's inappropriate.
Oh, so you've got to police it a little
Then
bit.
I have to police it.
So if it goes viral, you have to pay more attention and put more time into it.
And it's just like,
Oh, boy.
no. And so, but that's when I gain more followers.
No, it's a double-edged sword. But
So it is this double-edged sword. And I did a thing with the SOC last spring where it was like we did a women operator panel and it was women from all different genres, all different
is this the thing in Vegas?
The thing in
Yeah,
Vegas.
I was teaching the other course there.
That's
I think we
right.
saw each other there.
When you were doing cranes, we were doing the
yeah.
panel.
Yep.
And then the next day we were doing handheld all day.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was posting things from there, like these women doing different things.
Yep.
And man, this guy got on there about the last thing I need to see is women and minorities. And
Oh, God.
the way you're holding that camera, you have no business on a set. But the thing is, it's training. These people are new.
Yeah.
And it was just all this awful stuff about women and
it's also like,
minorities, and you should women's places in the home. I restricted him right away.
Yeah, sure.
The first comment, I can't remember what it was. And I wrote this really nice reply because I was like, is this a hater or is this somebody with a legitimate question and they don't understand what we're doing?
And it could also, by the way, be, as I've found, it could be someone who's just sick.
Yeah.
I mean, they're sick no matter what, but I mean, who actually is unstable and it's just, yeah.
So I saved a week's worth
weird.
of his comments and then reported him to Instagram
Yeah.
and then blocked him.
Yeah.
So I can't see him. He can't see me.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on with him
Yeah.
now.
There's
But
people out there.
occasionally that'll happen.
Yeah.
Like women should be in the
I didn't even
homes.
think about that. And you have to be on top of that because you don't want that polluting all that. Sure.
I mean, there was some comment that was not great that I didn't notice for a couple days once. And I was just like, oh no. But I feel like it's part of my obligation. If I'm going
Yeah.
to keep this page, it's going to be public,
Of course. Yeah.
then I need to keep it positive.
Yeah.
And for the most part,
Oh, that's great.
it is hugely positive,
Yeah.
which is really
That's
great.
great. I see. I mean, it comes up however it comes up, and it's always great to see. But is it weird thinking that you put something there and potentially 61,000 people see what you're?
Well, I don't ever, I just
Yeah.
put it out there and think, I hope somebody connects with this.
Yeah.
Or I think of the people that have messaged me, the women that have messaged me. And what's nice is sometimes, so I shot in Korea maybe a dozen years ago now, and there was our fixer told me that Korean women are not physically or mentally able to operate cameras, and that he had never met a woman operator before, but it
Wow.
was because I was white that I was able to do it. And I'm like, wait a minute,
Maybe it's they haven't
what are
given
you
you the
saying to me right now?
opportunity. It's
The things that people say to my face that they think are okay
wow.
because I'm a woman and somehow I'll be okay, somehow I'll
I gotta tell
understand
you, I
it.
really like the bubble in my mind that I live in where this is just ridiculous. I
And
just
I'm
can't even
like,
imagine.
Korean women could absolutely operate.
Yeah. Teach them how,
I
by the
work
way.
with them
Yeah.
at home
Yeah.
in America, and they're like so focused and on it
Yeah.
because of that Korean ethos from their
Okay.
parents.
The societally,
They're
yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. What if I'm a camera operator? Well, you need to be as precise as if you were a surgeon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was
Wow.
really interesting. So I like it when women from those countries or places where they don't think women can operate,
Oh, okay.
like a woman in Kenya contacted me and she said, I didn't know that there were other women operators. This is really great because she saw somebody else and then they connected off Instagram.
And she's a camera operator
They're
herself.
both camera operators, but they didn't know about each other.
That's
And they're
pretty
both in a country where there aren't a lot of women operators.
Wow.
So that happens periodically.
That's great.
And then they build alliances and then they kind of help each other out,
Yeah.
which is really nice. And then just people getting inspired.
Yeah. That's great. It's really cool. I love the account, and I'll obviously link to it, and everybody here should go check it out. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, listen, this has been actually this has been an education because I didn't know a lot of this about reality TV and whatever. Again, I don't watch it much.
Reality is a whole
I don't know a lot of people in it. So.
whole thing, yeah. And I'm old school, like, going back to real world. When I started, the demographic was 12 to 18 because
Yeah.
they're all kind of living vicariously like, oh, I can't wait to get
Well,
away
like you
from
said,
my
there were only like
parents.
3 shows, right?
Yeah, there were only
They're
3
targeted.
shows. And they're like, I can't wait to get away from my parents, which is what Real World and Road Rules is about.
Yeah.
The idea of I'm going to go on a road trip with my friends, or I'm going to move into some place and I have to have a lot of roommates because I'm broke, because I'm just out of high
Yeah.
school. But so because of that demographic, we could never show them drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Everything had to be poured in a cup or disguised in some way. And they would cut away when they were drinking it, unless it was something like in the case of Ruthie in Hawaii when she had alcohol poisoning and almost died.
God.
That was a great scene to shoot.
Jeez.
But yeah, so it was like there was a lot of ethics involved. Like we couldn't like make any sounds like like a sigh if it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Or we couldn't say anything. It had to be completely non-judgmental, quiet. In interview, the person who was doing interview could never tip their hand to some other storyline we were following if this cast member didn't know about it.
Sure.
It was very hands-off.
Yeah.
It was just about guiding them on this journey to becoming their authentic selves.
It's amazing.
It wasn't about goosing them to fight with each other.
To create a story, yeah.
So I came from a period that was very ethical and very respectful of their environment. And we would never go in the refrigerator and make a sandwich, for example, or other things that now seem to be okay. And so I come from a time where it was pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
And it was all single camera.
Well, but it also, like I said before, I think that sounds to me like they're documentaries, even though you made the distinction. And now I think it's more just because of the amount of it, you're always going to have things that maybe stray from the purity of it or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the right
Those
word.
halcyon days are.
Yeah.
Well, I do on occasion work on really great stuff. Like Project Runway, they never tipped their hand.
Is that right?
And it was a Buena-Marie. It was kind of the Buena-Marie ethos.
Okay.
Of if there was drama about somebody, you never made that person aware of the drama.
But it's probably not the norm anymore, just because, again, there's so much stuff out there.
There's so much of it.
Yeah. But
yeah, I think I came up at the best time.
Is there? I'll ask you this. I usually ask this as a final question. Is what would you offer up and coming camera operators? And maybe you want to say specifically to women camera operators. But I'll let you choose that. And or what do you wish you knew then that you know now? What lessons have you learned that can help younger people?
Wow, that's 6 hours worth.
Yeah, you don't have to hit all of it, but what do you want to throw out? This is your time to throw it out there.
So for operators just starting out, just say yes to stuff. this whole thing of like, don't work unless you're getting paid. It's like, how are you getting paid? Is it just money? Or for me, it's like, how am I getting paid? Am I getting paid money, monetarily, travel, working with people that I really, really like, especially in documentary? Is this something I'm really interested in that I'm going to come away knowing more? Will I grow spiritually as a person? Is this a good challenge for my skill set? Am I being given an opportunity in a safe environment to really stretch myself? So I look at all these things. And, in the documentary world, yeah, a lot of times I do work for free because there are really good stories out there that maybe don't have enough funding. They get the money together somehow to get camera and audio, but they may not be able to pay the crew. And I'm okay with that because it's kind of my way of giving back, especially if it's a really, meaningful documentary that needs to happen. Like the documentary I did in Africa about poaching. I mean, I didn't do it for free, but it was practically free because I supplied all the camera gear too. So what I was getting paid was less than that gear rental. So I was essentially working for free, but I felt like it was a story that needed to be told. And I feel like that my skill set was perfect for it, to be able to just roll with it and, capture people without stopping them, do their thing. And so I say yes to everything. Don't get bogged down in what I'm getting paid until you're further along in your career and you realize you're just being taken advantage of. So somebody may be trying to take advantage of you, but can you, in equal part, take advantage of the situation? Can you take advantage of them, of what they have to offer you as far as building your skills, building your knowledge, all that good stuff? So I was in reality for a long time, and then about 10 years ago, Real Husbands of Hollywood happened, which is a fake reality show. But they want us to pull our own focus, be able to move on a dime, if people are improv, scripted, whatever. So I've done a ton of those shows, and I did Welcome to Flatch last fall with Shauna Hagen, ASC. So that's a big name out there. But they wanted it to look very doc style and very caught in the moment, even though she is very specific about what she wants. It needed to look like it was very haphazard. So all my skills come into play with that because of all my years of reality and handheld, pulling my own focus, triggering my own zoom, cross-covering with people, doing the dance, so to speak, when we're both moving. So my documentary and reality skills apply very well to fake reality shows and mockumentary spoofs or whatever, but it's all storytelling, it's all angles, it's all things I practiced. So then when I started doing more traditional narrative, it made sense to me. And all I needed to do was finesse, the framing, the foreground, getting to that sort of thing, because I just feel like it transfers very well. And then like on comedy performances, I love it. Sometimes they're like, get us reactions of the people. And especially if I know the routine, it's like, I know that reactions are very important. And it's not just simply somebody laughing. It's the right person laughing at that joke and how they're laughing and how it's framed. So I don't, and then the handheld on that, I did a Kevin Hart comedy special last winter, and they wanted a tight angle on him to not be on a ped with a focus puller. They wanted it to be handheld, self-focus, pop zooms in and out as he's running back and forth. And so I'm in the audience on a 300 millimeter, pulling my focus, popping zooms. And it was all because of all those years of reality experience that I was able to do that and do it for an hour and a half solid without a break.
Wow.
So and the thing about reality and documentary, especially reality, it's dialogue driven. A lot of times it's cut on paper with the dialogue, and then they see the shots later. And a really good line may happen when you're repositioning or you're changing your focus or who knows what. So it's not all perfect. It's not all beautiful, but it's not because the operators are hacks. It's all circumstantial. It's all just choices of repositioning. A lot of times really great things happen when we back up for a wide shot because the pressure's off and then they really talk. And then we have to get back in there. So it might be a shot on the move to get back in there, but they use it. So it's not because we're not skilled. It's because it's all about what they're saying. That is what is important. And it's the shot that's married to what they're saying.
Yep.
So, and my advice to women operators, and this is kind of interesting. I've had to think a lot about this lately because of Me Too and then the push towards more women operating and different things like that. When I started, there was just one woman operator, and it was kind of a just in case sort of thing. There was always one woman operator, one audio mixer. And then at the end of Real World, that first season with me, I had been bumped to operator. So there were two women operators. And so there was always one. And some people keep that in their mind still of like, well, we already have our woman. Do you have any other names? And it's like, we're all perfectly skilled. And that if you're hiring because you think the guy is going to do better, please know this. Women are better listeners. We have a higher pain threshold. We are kind of less likely to complain because we don't want to be perceived as weak women. So, do the math. We're probably going to do just as good a job. So there's all this like stuff that, I kind of thought about over time, but I never necessarily thought of myself all the time as a woman operator. I was just an operator, happened to be a woman. I could execute it. I could do it. I could put myself up against anybody and it would be fine. And I was just respected for my skills and what I brought to the set. Forever, for like almost 20 years. This is your skills. We want you. Here you go. It had nothing to do with me being a woman. I would see women and I would try to get them in and get them to hire more than one woman or help my AC or this, that, or the other. But it was just kind of like, it wasn't really something that was always present. And then Me Too started. And then the questioning started. And I became really conscious that I was a woman as an operator. And then all of a sudden, I had to start quite often validating my existence. Wow, it's so easy for you to get jobs now because you're a woman. And it's like, so you think I'm here because I'm a woman? Do you know anything about me? like I've worked long and hard to get here and I can go up against the best of the guys, but it's like, but what I referred to earlier of the things people say to my face that they think I'll understand because it's women oriented. And it's like, I had a guy on a show that was telling me about how all the women are taking all the jobs. He can't get work anymore. He was going on and on and on. And I'm like, I'm looking at him and I'm like, why does he think it's okay to talk to me about this right now? And let me put that in perspective for you, why I'm thinking that. And I look at him and I ask him, okay, so we have this camera crew here right now, multicam. How many women are on this team? And he looked at me and was like, well, there's you. I said, that's right. There's me and a bunch of guys. So if you think women are taking all the jobs and you want me to listen to you and like really empathize with you about that, where are we right now? I am the only woman. And so you're telling me I'm taking a man's job and it should all be men. And he's like, no, that's not what I meant at all. And I'm like, I know that's not what you meant because you respect me as an operator, but it's not that we're taking all the jobs. It's that now people are being questioned. Why aren't you hiring the women? Why are you? I mean, I've been told to my face, we're not going to hire you because you're not strong enough. We don't think that your shots will be steady enough. We think that you're going to be too emotional and we need somebody that can be a little detached, not get caught up in the content, all this stuff. And then on the flip side of that, being hired because I'm a woman, oh, well, we feel like you'll be more sympathetic than a man would or this, that, or the other. And like as a gay woman, I've been offered jobs because and the person that hired me, I hope they've forgotten this or they don't listen to this or maybe it doesn't make the cut. But they're like, we're doing this follow doc on vampires and they feel like they were born gay. So we feel like you're the perfect DP for this. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to do this because I'm fascinated at people that live their lives as vampires. I am on board for the storytelling and I learned a lot on this shoot. It was kind of awesome, amazing, crazy. It was so cool. But the reason I was hired was like, it's like when the connection, like why I was hired because I'm a woman and then why I wasn't hired because I was a woman. And like, I'll tell you, if I'm ever hired strictly because I'm a woman, I will take it because for every one time I am hired only because I'm a woman. There were dozens of times I was not hired because I was a woman. So it's interesting. I never really felt of myself as a woman operator. I was always a camera operator that happened to be a woman.
Yeah.
But now I'm a woman operator. And I'm sure Lady Camera Guy has something to do with that. But there's just all this attention now being paid to women who are operators and us justifying our existence. And I have never, before the last, 6-7 years, had to justify my existence. And it's weird.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And to explain why I have a place on set, why I've earned that place on set, when the guys don't have to justify that existence. And it's just because it's one of the downfalls of all of us thinking about. And, and I don't know. And another thing that's happening that I would like any operators that are listening to this to think about, like when people are hired because they want more diversity or they want more inclusion, like quite often they'll hire people right out of school, young, moldable, but don't necessarily have the skills.
Yeah.
And then they let them fail. And then it's proof positive that women and minorities can't succeed.
Yep.
But if you're in a position where you see that happening, mentor that person, pull them aside, help them be successful. And I think that that's something that, like, as an operator, I've tried to do my whole career, even with PAs. Like, I was just talking to a PA yesterday about why I think she's really great and why I've already referred another one for a job because of, like, the work ethic that they have and their attention to detail, and then I ask them, like, where do you want to go? And then I try and hook them up with different organizations that can help them. Or it's just, we always need to be mentoring. And it doesn't matter if we're creating our competition, because we're not. We're creating maybe the person that's going to work next to us next time. Or we can't look at it as we're creating our competition. We need to look at it as we're creating better operators. And if they happen to take the job instead of us, which has happened to me plenty of times, it's fine. Because I took a job that somebody else probably thought was theirs at some point. It's just all this give and take, and we're all moving around. But yeah, so for women operators, please do not try and, like, put yourself in that mindset that you're a woman operator and that you have to justify it. Just try and think of yourself as a camera operator and get the gender out of it and focus on the skills and what makes you a good operator.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.